Someone decides if they trust you before you finish a sentence, and one clip near the end shows that decision might have swayed real elections, until scientists checked the math. You form an opinion about a stranger's trustworthiness in about a tenth of a second. That's what Willis and Todorov found in 2006, when people saw faces flashed for just 100 milliseconds and still gave ratings for trustworthiness, competence, and likability. Those snap ratings barely shifted even when the same people were given unlimited time to look afterward. Nobody has pinned down why the brain locks in an impression that fast. The study measured the speed and stability of the judgment, not its cause. Picture a job interview. The hiring manager may already trust or distrust you before you've finished your first sentence. Your first few seconds are doing more work than your best answer. People who are better looking get rated as more honest, more intelligent, even better parents, traits that have nothing to do with their face. Dion, Berscheid and Walster's 1972 study had participants judge photographs of strangers on personality and likely life outcomes, and the more attractive faces scored higher across almost every category. Researchers call this the halo effect. One visible positive trait bleeds into judgments about traits nobody has actually observed. It's the leading explanation, not a proven pathway, since the study measured the pattern rather than the internal process behind it. It's why a well-dressed stranger can talk their way out of a parking ticket faster than someone who looks tired and rumpled. Your face is quietly vouching for your character before you say a word. 10 seconds of silent video is enough to predict how a teacher will be rated by students months later. Ambady and Rosenthal's 1993 study showed raters brief, muted clips of instructors and asked them to judge traits like warmth and confidence, then compared those snap scores against real end-of-semester evaluations. The correlation was strong, even though nobody heard a single word spoken. What specific cue carries the signal, posture, gesture, expression, is still unknown. The study proved the pattern exists, not which piece of it matters. Picture judging a doctor's bedside manner from a 10-second clip with the sound off, and landing close to right. It's a strange vote of confidence for first impressions, and a warning about how fast we sort people into categories. In one study, people picked the winner of real political elections just by glancing at candidates' faces for 1 second, with no knowledge of the platforms or the party. Todorov, Mandisodza, Goren and Hall's 2005 study had participants rate competence from photographs alone, and those ratings predicted the actual election outcome well above chance. But later analyses complicated the story. Once name recognition and incumbency were controlled for, the effect shrank considerably, so the replication here is mixed, not settled. Still, it lines up with something uncomfortable. A candidate's face may be doing real work in the voting booth, quietly, before a single policy gets read. First impressions don't just color opinions, they can nudge outcomes with actual consequences. You decide if someone's trustworthy in a tenth of a second. That's the actual number Princeton researchers found when they flashed unfamiliar faces at people for just 100 milliseconds. Giving viewers more time barely changed their verdict, it just made them more confident in the snap judgment they'd already made. Think about a job interview handshake, or the half second before someone speaks on a first date. Your brain has basically written a review before the person finishes their opening sentence, and undoing that first read takes real evidence, not just more time in the room. Change the order of the exact same words, and you change the whole verdict. Solomon Asch in 1946 read people 2 identical lists of personality traits, one starting with intelligent and ending with envious, the other reversed. Same 6 words, same person, but the group who heard the positive traits first rated the target far more favorably overall. Asch argued the opening traits set a frame, and every trait that follows gets bent to fit it. Think of it as reading a flattering author bio before a book instead of after finishing it. That's why the first 30 seconds of a job interview can outweigh the next 30 minutes, no matter what you actually say. Before you decide if someone's smart, you've already decided if they're safe. Susan Fiske, Amy Cuddy, and Peter Glick's 2007 stereotype content model found that people judge warmth, friend or foe, before they judge competence, and that warmth verdict dominates the overall impression. It's why a warm-button competent coworker often gets more benefit of the doubt than a competent but cold one. The researchers proposed that reading intent mattered more for survival than reading skill, so warmth got priority, though that evolutionary reasoning is an inference rather than something directly tested. Next time you meet someone new, notice which question your gut answers first: can I trust them, or can they do the job? You'll usually answer the first one before you've consciously asked it. You can size someone up from half a second of awe. Phil Mackler, Alex Todorov, and Pascal Bellin, in 2014, played listeners' short vowel-only recordings, no words, no faces, and found strong agreement across listeners on traits like trustworthiness and dominance from voice alone. Listeners seem to be leaning on consistent acoustic cues, pitch, speed, and how the voice rises and falls, to make the call, though the study never showed those snap judgments were accurate, only that people agreed with each other. Think about how you decide someone's mood from a two-word voicemail before they've said anything meaningful. It means a phone screener can form an opinion of you before your resume even comes up. Your first impression of someone can actually change how they behave toward you. Mark Snyder and William Swan's 1978 study had people believe their partner was either hostile or friendly before a conversation, and those who expected hostility acted more combatively themselves, which then pulled genuinely more hostile responses out of the other person. The expectation didn't just color perception, it altered the perceiver's own behavior enough to create the very evidence that confirmed it. It's the office version of walking into a meeting assuming a colleague dislikes you, acting guarded, and watching them turn cold right back. That loop is why a bad first impression can become a self-fulfilling prophecy long after the original reason for it is gone. Tell people the evidence behind their first impression was fake, and most of them will keep the impression anyway. Lee Ross, Mark Lepper, and Michael Hubbard's 1975 study gave participants fake feedback about their own skill at judging suicide notes, then fully debriefed them, explaining the feedback was random and meaningless. Even after that debriefing, participants' self-ratings stayed anchored close to the false feedback they'd been given. Ross and colleagues suggested people build an explanation around the first piece of information, and that homemade theory survives even after its original source is deleted. It's why walking back a bad first impression at work rarely works with just an apology and a correction. The story someone built around you doesn't automatically get rebuilt too. A firm handshake can decide how a room reads you before you say a word. In a study by Chaplin and colleagues in 2000, judges rated people with firmer handshakes as more outgoing and emotionally expressive, and in a separate mock interview task those raters gave firmer shaking applicants better hire recommendations. Think about the 2 seconds at the start of any interview, hand out, grip, done, and a chunk of the evaluation is already locked in. Nobody has pinned down exactly why a squeeze reads as confidence rather than aggression. What's clear is that this 2-second gesture keeps outperforming resumes in shaping snap opinions in job settings. Watch a warm instructor on video and you'll swear his accent is charming, watch a cold version of the same man and that identical accent suddenly grates. Nisbet and Wilson's 1977 experiment showed students 2 videos of the same actor answering the same questions, warm in one, cold in the other, then asked them to rate his appearance, mannerisms, and accent separately. Ratings on all 3 unrelated traits shifted with the warmth of the personality, even though nothing about his looks or voice had actually changed. Afterward, most students denied that his personality had swayed their judgment of his accent at all. It's a clean demonstration of how one global impression bleeds into completely separate judgments, and how blind people are to that bleed. One rude comment can undo 10 kind ones, and that's not just a feeling, it's measurable. Skaronsky and Carlston's 1989 review of impression research found that negative information gets weighted more heavily than equally extreme positive information when people size up someone's character. Their explanation is the diagnosticity principle. Cruel or dishonest behavior is rare enough that people treat it as revealing, while a genuinely bad person can still fake a moment of kindness. So a first date where someone snaps once at a waiter can outweigh an hour of charm. That asymmetry is why a single visible flaw in a job interview or a first meeting sticks so much harder than any number of positives. If a stranger starts subtly copying your posture and gestures within the first few minutes of meeting you, you're likely to walk away liking them more, and you won't have noticed the copying at all. Chartrand and Barga's 1999 study had Confederates either mimic or not mimic a participant's mannerisms during a short task, then had participants rate how smoothly the interaction went and how much they liked their partner. Mimicked participants reported significantly higher liking and smoother interactions than those who weren't mimicked. Picture 2 people at a networking event unconsciously mirroring each other's crossed arms, that's the same effect at work. More recent attempts to replicate it have produced mixed results, so treat it as real but fragile. Walk into a luxury boutique wearing gym clothes, and staff may assume you're more important, not less. Bellezza, Gino and Keenan's 2014 studies found that observers rated a person who deliberately broke a dress code norm, like a professor in a t-shirt or a shopper in sneakers, as higher in status than someone dressed conventionally, as long as the deviation looked intentional rather than sloppy. The reasoning participants gave was that only someone with real security can afford to ignore the rules everyone else follows. Think of the tech founder in a hoodie at a formal pitch meeting. The mismatch itself becomes the message. It's a strange twist on first impressions, sometimes looking like you don't care what people think is exactly what makes them think more of you. A surname that's easy to say can make you seem more competent before you've spoken a word. Lahan, Koval, and Alter, 2012, found that people rate easy-to-pronounce names as more likable, and even rank law firms with simpler names as more prestigious than ones with hard-to-pronounce names, all else equal. The reason: your brain reads easy to process as good. Psychologists call it the Fluency Effect. So a lawyer named Bo Chen can get a subtle edge in trust over one named Czeslaw Wachowski, regardless of skill. It's why brands, politicians, and job applicants sometimes benefit just from having a name your mouth doesn't stumble over. People with rounder faces, bigger eyes, and softer features get treated like they're still kids, even as adults. Zebrowitz and Monteper's research on babyface overgeneralization found that adults with these infant-like features are consistently rated as more naive, warmer, and more trustworthy, regardless of their actual personality. The theory: our brains never fully switch off the instinct to see baby features as harmless, so we transfer that instinct onto adult faces that resemble them. In one study, baby-faced defendants were less often found guilty of intentional crimes, but more often blamed for negligence, because juries assumed they weren't the mastermind type. It means your bone structure can quietly write a character reference for you before anyone knows who you are. Drop your voice half an octave, and people will trust you with more power. Klofstad, Anderson, and Peters, 2012, played listeners' recordings of the same sentence pitch shifted up or down, and found that lower-pitched voices were consistently rated as more competent, more dominant, and more electable as leaders. Nobody's fully sure why pitch carries that weight. It may be a lingering association between deep voices and physical size or authority, but that's a hypothesis, not a proven cause. Still, the effect showed up again when they checked real candidates. The ones with lower voices tended to win more often. So the pitch of a debate answer might matter almost as much as what's actually said in it. A red jersey can change the score before the match even starts. Hageman, Strauss, and Leasing, 2008, had experienced Taekwondo referees judge identical bouts where competitors' gear was digitally recolored, and fighters wearing red were scored higher than the same fighters in blue. Feltman and Elliott's related work linked red clothing to perceived dominance in competitive settings. Nobody's confirmed exactly why red carries that charge for human judges, so treat the mechanism as an open question, not settled biology. Later attempts to replicate the referee bias finding in real competitions have produced mixed results, with some researchers arguing the effect shrinks once skill differences are accounted for. Either way, the color you're judged in might be doing some of the judging for you. Strangers can guess your income bracket just by looking at your face, and get it right more often than chance. Jornsdottir and Rule, 2017, showed participants neutral, expressionless photos of people from a range of socioeconomic backgrounds, and found viewers could identify who came from wealth or poverty with above-chance accuracy, even with no smiles, clothes, or context to go on. Faces judged as higher status were also automatically rated as more trustworthy, stacking one snap judgment on top of another. Nobody knows exactly what visual cue is leaking through. It might be subtle, long-term patterns of expression settling into the resting face. It means a first impression might be reading your history, not just your features. Tall people get picked as leaders more often, and it's not because they're smarter or more capable. Judge and Cable's 2004 meta-analysis pooled decades of data and found a steady link between height and both perceived leadership potential and career earnings. Picture two candidates with identical resumes walking into a boardroom. The taller one gets rated as more authoritative before either says a word. Nobody knows exactly why this bias exists. It might tie back to old associations between size and dominance, but that's speculation, not established fact. The unsettling part is how much this can shape who ends up running the meeting, the company, even the country, for reasons that have nothing to do with skill. If you call your coworker sneaky behind their back, the person listening might start seeing you as sneaky instead. This is spontaneous trait transference, documented by Skaronsky, Carlston, May, and Crawford in 1998. Listeners unconsciously link the trait word to the person saying it, not just the person it describes, especially when they don't know the target well. Think about a job reference call, badmouth a former employee's laziness, and the listener quietly starts filing you under lazy too. It means gossip runs both ways, and the mouth doing the talking pays a hidden tax. People who act confident get treated as competent, even when their actual track record says otherwise. Anderson, Bryan, Moore and Kennedy tracked group interactions in 2012 and found overconfident members were rated as more capable and handed higher status than their real performance justified. Watch any team meeting, the person who speaks loudest and fastest about a topic often gets deferred to, regardless of who actually knows more. The likely reason is that real competence is hard to verify in the moment, so people substitute an easier cue, certainty. Later work found this effect shrinks in some settings, so treat it as a real but inconsistent bias, not a guaranteed shortcut to respect. Using big words to sound smart usually backfires. Oppenheimer's 2006 study on needlessly complex language had people rate writing samples, and found dense vocabulary made the author seem less intelligent, not more. Imagine two cover letters with identical content, the one stuffed with jargon and thesaurus-fed synonyms gets rated as duller by the reader. The mechanism is processing fluency. When a sentence is hard to parse, that difficulty gets misread as the writer's difficulty thinking clearly, not the reader's difficulty reading. So the plain-spoken candidate often wins the first impression before the interview even starts. Strangers can size up your actual personality just from your social media profile, and they're surprisingly accurate. Bach, Stopfer, Bazire, Kuffner, Gebauer, Wagner and Gosling had observers rate real Facebook pages in 2010, then compared those ratings to the profile owner's own personality tests and to reports from close friends. The judgments lined up well for traits like extroversion and openness, close to the accuracy of people who actually knew them. The reason seems to be that profiles carry real behavioral residue, actual posts, photos, and interests, rather than a purely staged highlight reel. So that impression a recruiter forms scrolling your page for 10 seconds might be more accurate than you'd like. Put on a pair of glasses and people will instantly think you're smarter. Leder, Forster, and Gerger in 2011 had observers rate the exact same face with and without glasses, and the glasses version got rated as more intelligent, and slightly less attractive. Nothing about the person changed except the frames. Picture a job interview, two identical resumes, but the candidate wearing glasses gets judged as more competent before they say a word. Nobody has pinned down why the stereotype exists. It's likely a learned association between glasses and studiousness, not any real signal of IQ. That's the risk. A prop borrowed from an old stereotype can quietly outweigh someone's actual qualifications in the first 10 seconds of a meeting. Say the same sentence in a foreign accent, and people will believe it less. Levari and Kesar in 2010 had listeners rate trivia statements read aloud by native and non-native speakers, and the non-native versions were consistently judged less true, even though the words were identical. Picture a customer service call. The accented rep explains the same policy as the local one, but callers rate the accented explanation as less trustworthy. It happens because accented speech takes a bit more effort to process, and your brain quietly mistakes that extra effort for a sign the statement itself is shaky. Later work found the effect shrinks the more familiar you are with that particular accent, so it's less a fact about foreign speakers and more about your own listening fluency. Which snap judgment about you turned out to be dead wrong?